Alright class, so now we have another document, that is document B, and don't forget our main question, our essential question. What were the main causes for the fall of Rome? So what were the things that caused the fall of Rome, but the main ones, okay? So let's take a look at this document and see if we can figure out the main cause. So right off the bat, let me just show you. So these are two excerpts, meaning two little bits of a document. This one comes from a book called Concerning Military Matters by the Roman historian Vegetius, and it was written 450 years of the Common Era. So it is a source from that time period, so this person might be able to tell us a lot about what was going on at the time. So let's take a look at what he has to say. Before the year 400 of the Common Era, foot soldiers wore breastplates and helmets. So the soldiers, they wore their equipment, right? But when, because of negligence and laziness, so the soldiers were starting to become lazy. They didn't want to do their thing. They didn't want to dress up. Because of that, parade ground drills, so like when they were marching, were abandoned. So they were no longer doing the parade drills. The customary armor began to seem heavy since the soldiers they almost never wore the uniforms. So they didn't practice, so now the uniforms are heavy. They didn't want to do what they were supposed to do in the army. Therefore, they first asked the emperor to set aside the breastplates. So they didn't want to wear the breastplates that protect you from arrows and, like weapons and whatnot. And then the helmets. So our soldiers fought the gods without any protection for chest and head, and were beaten by archers. Of course, you're going to war without your helmet. Imagine, you go ride a motorcycle, you don't have your helmet. If something happens to you, right, you're more likely to fail. You're more likely to suffer injuries. Although there were many disasters which led to the loss of great cities, no one tried to restore breastplates and helmets to the infantry, to the soldiers. Interesting. Thus, it happens that troops in battle, they were exposed to wounds because they have no armor. Think about running and not about fighting. So, what does that tell us about the main causes for the fall of Rome, right? Think about what may have caused the armies to fail. Think about how effective the armies were. They're not training, right? Let me see here. They're not training because they are being negligent and they're being lazy, and the uniforms are heavy. So that is one document, okay? Let's take a look at the other one here. This one is from Michael Grant, The Fall of the Roman Empire, a Reappraisal. And this is from 1982. So I was alive when this text was written. So it's not from the time period, but this person seems to be a historian. So let's see. There can be little doubt that the weak spot of the late Roman army were largely due to the eventual failure. So at one point they're going to fail to enforce regular conscription for the draft of soldiers. So they were not paying attention to the soldiers' needs. The exempted categories were numerous. Hosts of senators, bureaucrats and clergymen were entitled to avoid the draft. So if you are a rich person, you don't need to serve the army, right? Hosts of senators, like the politicians, people that politicians liked, bureaucrats, people that dealt with the government, and clergymen, religious people, they were entitled, they could avoid the draft. and among other groups who escaped were cooks, bakers, and slaves. So, what about this text? What does it show us about the main causes for the fall of Rome, right? Imagine if you didn't want to serve, you didn't need to. If you were rich, and if you were poor, I guess you would have to serve, so no one was paying attention to that. So what does that tell us about the Romans, how they fell? And since we're here, let's take a look at the questions. So according to Vegetius, and this is from the first document from Vegetius, what led to the changes in Roman military armor and training techniques? So why did they change? Why did they stop doing the drafts? Why did they stop doing the parades? And write it down. How did the change in the breastplates and helmets contribute to the decline of Rome? In other words, they stopped wearing the breastplates and helmets. What's going to happen as a consequence of that? What is conscription? So that is a vocab word for you. Type that on Google and see what comes up, or check your dictionary. In what ways could the failure to enforce conscription weaken Rome? So how can the government, the empire, not enforcing conscription, how is that going to make Rome weak? And is there any connection between document A and document B? And explain that. All right.